What is going on, everybody? Nathan here with another Salty Productions Overwatch gameplay video. Today we're going to be talking about Symetra, and I'm going to be giving you a few tips here and there as to how to climb ladder more effectively and how to strategize as Symetra, because Symetra is actually one of the most strategically dynamic characters in the game because of her teleport ability, which allows our teammates to traverse distances we otherwise could not, which allows for huge plays to be made. So first of all, let's talk about what Symetra has going on in her kit. First of all, she has a photon projector, which has two methods of firing. The first one is the beam mode, which actually fires a beam out 12 meters, and there are 3 tiers of damage that can be achieved with this beam the longer you are locked onto an enemy. The first tier is 60 damage per second, the second tier is 120, and the third is 180. And yes, you heard that right, 180 damage per second, which is absolutely crazy. So that means I could take out an equivalent enemy Symetra in just over 1 second, which is pretty bananas. So other than that, which is how Symetra deals the majority of her damage in close quarters team fights, she can actually fire these orbs which deal at their maximum charge, I believe 140 damage. So we can basically one-shot a tracer or a tracer equivalent class. That ability is best used to clear out choke points and to try to lead the enemy and really just get as much consistent damage as you can. It's a little hard to really get consistent damage at a longer range, however, because enemies are able to easily dodge out of the way of these orbs. But the goal should be, when you are spamming down a choke, to anticipate where the enemy is going to end up and then fire an orb in that direction. For example, if you see that, let's say, a Soldier 76 has recently taken a headshot from your Widowmaker, but he is still alive, you'd probably anticipate that he's going to be traveling backwards toward his team or towards spawn, which is a source of safety. And from there, you can fire an orb and hopefully secure that kill. Other than her photon projector, which I will probably talk about a little bit more, Symetra has the ability to teleport, which I mentioned. And then also she can send 3 turrets out at once. And this should be used to essentially either ambush an enemy on defense, or on offense, you can actually save up all 3 turrets and send them out all at once, which makes it hard for enemies who can only kind of focus on one target at a time. It makes them hard for them to deal with that situation. And a good example of that would be somebody like a Junkrat. For example, Junkrat's grenades are very powerful, but he can't always fire them very quickly. He has kind of a lower rate of fire with those. And so if you can spread out your turrets in such a way where the area of effect damage from his primary fire does not hit the turrets, then it makes it hard for him to deal with an ambush scenario. Let's talk about her turrets a little more. So her turrets have 30 health in total, and they can be deployed basically across the map. Now, the general strategy you want to follow with your turrets is to deploy them above the enemy, where the enemy has to look in a different direction than where the team is going to be located. So for example, there's 2, it's good to not always use all 3 of them at once, but for example, I want to use 2 turrets as all the way up there, and I actually forgot to set up my teleport, so we are going to go ahead and do that right now, which our team will be spawning from over here. So I'm just going to set up that teleport to make sure that we can respawn faster. So there's a ton to talk about with that teleport, and I'll move on to that in just a second. But continuing on with our turret discussion, basically I like to use these in a couple of ways. So for example, I know the enemy is moving in here, and I want to again keep them up as high as possible because it's much harder for the enemy to turn and look at them. And using that now, for example, I can slow down the Roadhog's movement speed, and now I'm actually firing at the Reinhardt shield. So fun fact, if you guys did not know, the photon projector actually increases ammo based on whether it is hitting shield or not. And so I can actually fire indefinitely at a Reinhardt shield, and I think I'm gonna get taken out by that Mora there, but maybe our turret will be able to secure the kill for us. So Symetra is actually a great pick against a very shield-heavy composition, not only because her photon beam actually gains ammo against shields, meaning you can fire at them indefinitely, but also her orbs, it's much easier to hit the big targets, which shields tend to be, because her photon orbs deal a ton of damage. 140 damage for a fully charged orb is pretty crazy, considering how fast I can actually get these little guys out there. So I'm going to go ahead and use my, shoot, where did that come from? I'm trying to stay in safety here. I don't exactly know where that Ashe actually threw that grenade from. But, so for example, my role right now is to kind of spam as much as possible. I'm going to actually continue to charge up my beam, even though I might, the enemy Symmetra's ultimate is in the way. It's best to actually take those opportunities to charge up your beam as much as possible if you are anticipating a close quarters fight later on. So right now it looks like my teleporter was destroyed, so I think I'm going to set it up one more time here. So again, Symetra is very good strategically against enemies who have a tough time dealing with their turrets and who you can ambush pretty effectively. For example, Junkrat was the example I gave before. I'm trying to think of other examples of people who have tough time dealing with turrets. I would say Reinhardt has a pretty tough time, obviously, because he is melee focused. And we'll try to get a bunch of damage into that Ashe, although that did not work out very well. I'm going to try to take out that Ashe. See, there I can anticipate the actual direction that the Ashe was going to take, and hopefully I can get enough damage on this Roadhog to finish him off. Although, man, is it tough to put like 900 damage into Roadhog because he has his extra healing ability. So finally, Symetra's ultimate is the Photon Barrier, which is a global ultimate. It affects the entire map, and you can technically use it from spawn, where your team might be able to take advantage of that ability, but it's hard to get the accuracy down when you're using it globally from that far away. And I'm going to go ahead and contest here. I know it's probably not the smartest, because I think that I could probably be taken up pretty easily, but I need to reload here soon. So we're just going to take cover for just a moment. Make sure that this is a little more shielded. Continue to contest. And in order to protect myself from the Roadhog, definitely set up the barrier up. And I'm completely safe at this point, which is the beauty of the Photon Barrier. So now he'll try to essentially get behind the barrier, and you really abuse that barrier in close quarters. And so, where did that Bob go? Shoot, I don't know. That might have been me who woke him up. I wasn't sure if he actually touched him there. But, try to get this Ashe. I have so much to talk about with the teleporter, but I just want to escape this scenario in one moment. So, again, I can actually charge up all of my ammo on this Reinhardt. And I did get one shot into Ashe. Seeing if I can actually pick her off from a distance. Maybe. But the point is that they actually won't be able to contest this particular point. Oh, I got the Reaper. Nice. And So right now, actually, my teleporter's not up, so that's not good. You always want to have your teleporter set up very strategically so that your teammate can either gain a height advantage off of spawn, or it just decreases their walk from spawn overall. So for example, I'm going to maximize the amount of distance that allows our team to travel from spawn, makes their time to the front lines much shorter, which is a very, very important factor for payload in Overwatch. And again, notice how I'm kind of setting up my turrets up on the top there, because that is going to allow us to have a little bit more freedom in how we attack these guys, because they have to turn around and attack the turrets. All right, we are doing pretty good, a pretty solid game so far. So right now, I think the best strategy is to let all my turrets recharge, and then I'm going to stick by one of these turrets. This one is probably going to be easily seen and destroyed, so I'm going to save up. Same thing there, and looks like Ryan is going to be charging in, so let's apply some preemptive damage over there. And I want to talk about hero selection in a moment, kind of who the good matchups and synergies are with Symetra. I'm actually going to try to build up some beam off of Bob, which now we can transition over to the Mercy. Try. Shoot! I lost her in the visuals there. So on offense, Symetra is great to set up a teleporter to kind of coordinate with your allies so that you can make a play by either bypassing a choke or coming in from a different angle than the enemy expects. So that's how you deliver a lot of value as Symetra on offense. On defense, she's great at just walling off an entire choke point area, basically by setting up a bunch of turrets in a particular room, and then it's hard for enemies to actually deal with you from there because there's just too many targets to hit and too much damage that needs to be dealt in order to clear you out. So just gonna kind of cover my Roadhog's retreat here, avoid all of that spam, and I think right now it's probably best advisable to just set up some turrets. Definitely want to produce teleporter to decrease our walking time to cart. Unfortunately, that they can target it. They can target that teleport location from our spawn, but try to. Man, I keep waking up this hog. This is really it can be like tough. I don't know why I keep doing that. Rookie mistake, Nathan. All right, so we were able to focus down that hog, and here is where once I get some beam charge flowing, you can just absolutely wreck people, assuming that I can actually track that Mora, which was a little bit tough there. But here, going to just make sure that I'm setting up all my turrets and that I always have turrets up. You always want to be checking in the number in the lower left there. See, I have 3 out of 3 turrets. If that is below 3, you always want to be preemptively setting up turrets, and you only want to build up that stockpile when you anticipate an attack from a particular direction or you want to surprise the enemy with all of those turrets at once. So on offense, right now I have team chat muted, but normally I would be planning out my strategy with my team. In fact, let's figure out where we want to set up teleporter. So I'll set up teleporter to left side high ground so we can spam down on them. Oh, and team chat is muted, unfortunately. I will set up teleporter to left side high ground so we can rain down fire on them from above. Okay. So coordinating with your team is a huge part of playing Symetra, and especially you can use some of those advanced functionalities of the teleporter would be if you can coordinate with an allied diva to, for example, transport her ultimate bomb through the teleporter, or perhaps the Junkrat tire, which can go through the teleporter automatically. Any entity that is not a player will automatically go through the teleporter. So one other way that you can use teleporter, other than to kind of strategically deliver your team to an area, is to spawn teleporter in front of the middle of the enemies. The teleporter has 300 health, so it takes the enemies a small amount of time to destroy it, but in that time you can send through all 3 of your turrets and actually create like a big burst of damage that they have to then deal with. So I'm going to be a little careful about getting headshotted here from above. And I think at this point, I'm going to try to not spam at the Rhine shield because that seems a little unwise. Although if I can manage to build up a beam, that would be amazing. So I'm a little bit out of range, unfortunately. Ouch. Oh, I can't get a headshot. Okay. So in terms of positioning and movement, Symetra walks at a pretty average speed, and for that reason, it makes her pretty easy to kind of target and take down. For example, that was just a mistake. I was standing in a spam heavy area where the Roadhog was able to hook me pretty easily, but you always want to position yourself so that you are firing your photon projector's beam in the event of a close quarters team fight at the maximum edge of your range, because you want all of the time that you can possibly get to basically move out of the way of enemy projectiles, and that is harder to do when you're like right next to them. For example, a Farah can just fire at her feet, or that's a bad example because Farah would probably be in the air pretty often. But let's say like an Ashe, for example, she can just throw a grenade at her feet, shoot the grenade, and then you get damaged. So instead, it's nice to stay at the edge of your range. And I actually probably want to move up, move my teleporter here because our spawns have changed. We'll set up one sentry right there and save our other two. So again, kind of notice how I'm strategically setting up sentry turrets so that they recharge in time. Let's see, we spawn over there. So I think I'll just kind of decrease our time from spawn that we can possibly achieve for the team. So let's talk about hero matchups. So against D.Va, let's just kind of go right down the line. So against D.Va, Symetra has a tough time generating the kind of damage that it takes to kill a D.Va from full health. So in a 1v1, she will pretty effectively take you out. And the same logic goes for Winston as well. Both of those champions can clear out your turrets pretty easily because they have a lot of health to throw around, and they can transition between targets very easily. In fact, D.Va doesn't have to reload, so she can kind of just switch her firing from turret to turret and take you out that way. So here I'm going to try to maybe form some extra. Go over there. Distract the enemy so that I can build up another Photon Barrier. And there is some debate between whether it's best to kind of use your Photon Barrier sideways or kind of to build like a stronger version of a Reinhardt shield in front of you. I find that in a very messy team fight, such as take that particular scenario that just happened. So I ulted on the middle of the cart, and so that means that I'm only exposed to half of the enemy team, which is good because I can then kind of leverage my positioning next to the shield to control my exposure to whichever enemies I'm facing. For example, if I know that a particular enemy has a cooldown on an important ability, let's say Ashe's grenade, for example, I know that my barrier will block that. So I can control my exposure to the enemy that way. And I'm going to try to think how we can actually progress through. Okay, so I think the best strat is to really just kind of keep setting up those turrets. And maybe, shoot. I was going to see if I could bypass to kind of set it up over on the top of that ledge. Okay, so here this should be a pretty easy kill on Reinhardt because I can just generate beams super fast. And we just melt through people. Oh, I can't get hooked. No! Mistakes were made, boys. Mistakes were made. That was terrible. I should have telegraphed kind of the distance that Roadhog was going to send out his hook. So kind of going down the line again, against tanks, Orissa's a pretty effective target against Symetra because Symetra tends to be able to clear out chokes pretty easily. And let's see. No, I actually don't have to use ultimate here. It's surprising. And Orisa is not very mobile on average, so she's pretty easy to hit with orbs. And not only that, but you can actually build up your photon projector on Orissa's shield. So Orissa's kind of an easy counter for Symetra to deal with. After Orisa, again, Rein, we counter Rein pretty well. And I would say that the meta has been pretty heavy on Rein usage recently, which makes, Symetra a pretty effective pick against Reins nowadays. For, the reasons that I've already mentioned, such as being able to charge your photon projector, etc. So I'm going to go ahead and leave, and we'll get queued right up, and I can continue talking about Symetra. Roadhog, it is just hard to outdamage everything that is required to take out a Roadhog, because with his healing ability basically off cooldown, That means that you have to deal 900 damage to Roadhog, and that's assuming that he has no healing support from his team either, so it's really tough to actually out 1v1 a Roadhog, and Roadhog is kind of a soft counter in that way to Symetra. Additionally, Symetra doesn't really have many defenses against not getting hooked, so which the enemy Roadhog in the last game was able to take advantage of pretty effectively. Beyond Roadhog, Sigma is pretty great for Symetra to deal with, assuming that it's in a close quarter scenario. Sig's orbs will deal, I mean, like, decent damage against Symetra, because if he were to direct hit you, it would essentially take like 3 bursts for him to kill you. So that is a pretty easy target, assuming that it's in close quarters, because you can basically bypass his only defense, which is to absorb your orbs with his gravity field. But after Sigma, Wrecking Ball is kind of an interesting matchup, because Ball can outdamage Symetra with headshots and leading in a 1v1 by using his stomp ability. Other than that, though, Wrecking Ball is a huge target, and it's very easy to hit him with orbs, and you can also gain a lot of beam damage from keeping beam on Ball, because he's just such a big target. So that is kind of like a weird scenario where you don't want to get 1v1'd by Ball, but you can take advantage of his qualities to deal just like a ton of damage to him and build up your photon projector. Winston is a hard counter against Symetra because he can easily handle clearing out all 3 of your orbs. For example, if I had this set up on a wall, Winston can come in with all, I think, 500 of his health, go boom, 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 and then all of your turrets are dead, providing 0 value for you and your team. So I was messing with that Doomfist. I don't know where he went, though. But other than that, Winston will, I mean, even though you can generate more damage against a Winston with your photon beam, he has too much health, and he can lead in with his shift ability to where usually most of the time Winston will always be able to out damage you. And so you have to be careful of when they start running Winston against Symetra. After Winston is Zarya, and Zarya counters Symetra because her orbs are very predictable. They move very slowly, and so Zarya can pretty effectively just bubble against your orbs and build her own damage up. And then beyond that, when Zarya is pretty lit from her own charging of her weapon, she can actually out-damage you pretty effectively because she is 400 health, you only have 200, and starting out at least... let's say I was starting my beam out from level 1 and trying to charge up as much as possible. Kind of the damage averages out from when I'm able to gain a bunch of damage from keeping my beam on Zarya versus Zarya already having like a pretty high charge rate. So she'll generally be able to out 1v1 you because she just has more health, even though you're dealing kind of the same damage. If that makes sense. So moving into the DPS category, Ashe is a tough target again for Symetra to deal with because she can kind of keep your distance and can headshot you pretty easily, and she can quickly destroy your turrets even if they are spread apart, because she can just go boom, 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 and they're all down, and again you are useless in that respect, and you have to wait for them to recharge again. Bastion is a tough SOB when you are playing Symetra because even though you can outspam him generally by sending balls his way, if he dodges out of the way of those orbs, he can avoid that damage, and he can be hard to focus down, especially if he has healing support, because he just heals for too much damage where yes, you can focus down the choke a lot, but if he has any support behind him, he just has a lot of armor. And also, one thing to mention as Symetra too is that her beam inflicts damage on a tick basis, and armor protects against every single individual point of damage. Not point of damage, but instance of damage is a better description, actually. So, for example, a Sombra who might have to fire 60 bullets into an enemy who has armor is a lot less effective than a Farah who fires one rocket against armor, because armor is more advantageous against a bunch of individual sources of damage. Now, what that means is that it's a lot more effective to fire a fully charged orb blast at an enemy with armor than the photon projector, because that applies damage on a tick basis. So that is just a little tip if you happen to be running up against a diva or a Winston that's at full health and particularly hard to kill. You might want to run in that fight with some orbs before switching to your beam mode. Against Doomfist, it's really easy to ambush Doomfist with turrets because Doomfist will tend to chase you, although this answer changes a little bit the higher MMR you go, but generally, once you have him in a turret beam and he's slowed down a little bit, turrets apply a slowing effect of about 20% on your movement speed, and so it's definitely best to bait a Doomfist into a turret beam before attempting to deal with him. Otherwise, he can handle you pretty easily. Beyond Doomfist, we move on to Genji, and he goes pretty even with Symetra, I would say, because he can dodge around a lot, but he's also very reliant on his movement, and so if you can catch a Genji in a turret beam, he's a lot less effective there. In addition, he can deflect your orbs back to you, and so that makes you a little bit less effective, but I would say that in general, you kind of go even or in a 1v1, but he definitely has a harder time clearing out your turrets if he is caught in them. After Genji comes Hanzo, and Hanzo can generally outdamage you, but he is very weak at clearing out your turret nests. He has a hard time focusing from target to target very rapidly because he has to kind of charge up each time he uses his bow. And so it's best to catch Hanzo in a nest because he can outdamage you. So he's a little bit of a weaker, a little bit of a stronger hero against Symetra. For Junkrat, he's a little bit easier to deal with because, again, he has a hard time dealing with multiple targets at once. The key here being that you spread out your turrets so that they are not affected by his area of effect abilities all at once. And I would say you can't get too close to a Junkrat either, because not only can he throw his trap out, which he could potentially bait you into a trap, but being able to toss the mine out in front of himself and deal, ridiculous damage there, it's a lot easier to kill you if he hits you with a mine, because that will take out over half of your health. After Junkrat is Mccrea, and Mccrea is pretty easy to kill at close range. He's like a pretty easy kill, granted that his stun is on cooldown. If you know that the Mccrea still has his stun up, he's a very, very dangerous enemy. But beyond that, he's pretty harmless and is a pretty easy target to kind of predict where he's going to move with your photon orbs. After Mccrea is Mei, and Mei's an interesting matchup because you can go pretty even damage-wise with Mei, but she counters you more on the strategic side of things. So she can wall off wherever your teleporter plays happen, and which makes her dangerous there. And also, if you are caught in close quarters with a Mei, you might be able to get a fully charged orb into her and then attempt to finish her off with either another orb or beam, but by that time it is a very high likelihood that she'll be able to freeze you, and so you have to be very, very careful getting caught close quarters in a Mei, because her freezing ability will allow her to just instantly headshot you, so that is dangerous. After Mei is Farah, and Farah is probably the hardest counter for Symetra, because Symetra has zero methodology to deal with a Farah up in the air that's staying out of range and that's being very safe. And so that's a harder target for Symetra to deal with. And in fact, if you have an enemy Symetra that's being particularly annoying, I would highly recommend that you make that switch to a Farah, or have one of your teammates make that switch to a Farah, because there's just nothing that a Symetra can do other than using her ultimate Photon Barrier. All right. So, beyond the Farah, Reaper is after Farah, and he can outdamage you in close quarters because Reaper requires no actual ramp up for damage to kind of increase. And so you got to be careful in close quarters when he has Wraith form. I would say if you know that his Wraith form is on cooldown, then you can pursue him, but you preferably should lead in with either an orb or he should be a little more damaged, because I think at full health, it's still possible for him to lifesteal back enough damage where he can trade with you. He's kind of a dangerous matchup in close quarters there. Soldier 76 is kind of a soft counter towards Symetra. He can generally take you out pretty easily at a distance through either headshotting or his Helix rockets. And also additionally, why he's effective is because he can take out your turrets very easily. He can definitely switch targets very easily. Although if you ambush him, it's a higher likelihood of attaining that particular kill, because he just can't deal with all of that damage at once. All right. So, this is, I like to follow this pattern as Symetra, where you always want to place your teleporter close to spawn so that your teammates actually use it. And then when you do place it, you want to give them a height advantage. So for example, here, this teleporter position is useful even when they've actually rounded the corner. We're always going to be getting value from the teleporter because the enemy actually can't fire up and over the edge in order to take out the teleporter there. So here we're going to set up a few sneaky turrets up high in order to get increased ultimate charge. And I'm actually going to join my teammates up here where I can be a little bit more covered, and I can spam from behind the Rhine shield. Let's see. Continuing down with kind of our hero matchups. Sombra is a pretty easy pick for Symetra because you can interrupt Sombra's hack ability by basically just inflicting any tick of damage on her with your Photon Projector. Additionally, Sombra's hack does pretty much nothing against Symetra, and so she's a pretty easy kill. Let's see, after Sombra is Torbjorn, and so Torbjorn's turrets are pretty easily to spam out with orbs, but in close quarters, Torbjorn is a little more dangerous because he can use his E ability to outdamage you all at once, and I continue to make mistakes against Roadhogs, man. I keep getting pulled. That is, so, you know, you got to take those moments to kind of self-reflect and understand what went wrong in your games. And here I'm definitely getting the vibe that I just keep getting hooked consistently. So I'm going to make a mental note to just stay further away from Roadhogs because they do counter me a little bit more. But I'm going to keep sending down some spam through my orbs here. And hopefully, actually, this card position makes it a little more viable for me to be scrappy with my Photon Projector beam because my options are, or my engagement ranges are a little bit more shorter, which makes it easier to just nail down all of the enemies. And so here I'm just going to continue to build off of the Rhine shield. And we got barrier up there, so I'm just going to be able to deal a ton of damage. And team is looking good so far, man. This is looking pretty professional at this point. One thing to note with your photon orbs that is a little more useful is that, particularly when you're paired with a Baptiste, you can very rapidly send orbs through his matrix barrier, which allows you to track enemy movement at a higher sort of rate of fire, because they'll deal pretty much the same damage as if you fired a full orb, because they're being amplified by his matrix ability. And so you definitely want to actually increase your rate that you produce those orbs when that ability is present. And also, if you happen to be firing against an enemy tracer, because she is so fast, sometimes it is more advisable to switch up your rate of fire for your orbs to be more fast, because it's just harder to nail down a tracer with a full orb blast. You kind of need just a higher rate of fire because she just jumps around so fast. So tracers can be very dangerous that way. And speaking of tracer, that's kind of the next hero. So tracers can definitely outmaneuver you and will bypass you entirely to go destroy a teleporter. So she's a little bit more a little bit more dangerous that way because she's just a little more quick and can avoid your orbs. But I will say that because she's so weak, if you happen to nail her with one orb off the bat, she's still a pretty easy kill. So it really depends kind of on the distance that you engage the tracer at, whether you can win that 1v1. And then the last DPS was Widow, and she counters you pretty easily because she's generally able to just headshot you. There's not a lot of ways that you can prevent yourself from getting headshot other than Photon Barrier. So I'm gonna see what the situation is here. I don't think my team is here at the moment, so it's best to kind of group up again. And maybe I can actually get some free ult charge based off of that sentry location. There is a soldier on our left here. And then finally, to talk about healers a little bit. I would say that with Ana, she's a pretty easy kill. The only danger is if you get nailed with her biotic grenade. Baptiste can be an issue, especially if he has his immunity field on cooldown, because you have to take out that first before you can eliminate him in a 1v1 scenario. And that's hopefully going to deal a ton of damage. And I got the Reinhardt there. We're going to go ahead and nest up here, although there is a soldier behind, and he's a little scary right now. So I definitely... that can be one of the hard things, is that, like, a soldier, if he gets that initial headshot on you, it can be hard to survive. So that's why a lot of strategic planning and a lot of foresight goes into kind of setting up these turret nests and making sure that you always lead in with the most advantage that you can muster. And then talking about Brigitta, she is a pretty easy kill versus Symetra because you can build all of your ultimate charge off of her shield, or additionally you can kind of just focus her down with Photon Beam. Oh my gosh, I need to nail this Farah, but she is hard countering me again, so I'm glad that our BAP here was able to take her out for me. Here's probably where I would switch heroes, honestly, if I wasn't recording a video, just because it is so hard to nail a Farah, and she counters me so effectively. Like, I can do absolutely nothing against a Farah. But just going to continue to play Sim here, because for the purposes of this video. Because it's never advisable to truly one-trick in Overwatch. Got the Farah there. And I hopefully can deal some damage in Matrix here. Oh, and I got the Mercy and a ton of damage on the Hog. I think I can actually leverage that into a full kill if I stay out with my beam here. And we can focus on to Soldier, deal a ton of damage. 180 damage per second coming down the pipe at you. And that's what a fully charged Symetra is capable of dealing. Nice. So it's a good round. Moving down the line, against a Lucio, you definitely want to trap a Lucio in a turret before you attempt to take him on, because his movement, he's very reliable on his movement speed, and if you can get that minus 20% started on a hero that's so reliant on his movement speed, he's a lot easier to take down. But he is good at clearing your turrets out quickly because he's just able to switch targets quickly. And then Mercy is generally a hard kill for Symetra to secure because she's so mobile. She can fly away to her team all the time. And with Symetra, you generally are taking out enemies that are probably a little bit more on the fringe. It wouldn't be a very common scenario where you would be firing specifically at a Mercy, because Mercies tend to just cover themselves with their team and also be more towards the back line, and that's not really your forte, is aiming at the back line. So Mercy's a little bit harder to track down. Mora is a similar scenario as the Mercy, but when a Mora is out of position, she's easier to kill. And then I would say that Zenyatas are easy to... They will kill you very easily at a distance, but in close quarters, you can pretty much almost always outdamage a Zenyatta. Across the... So just coordinating with team, making sure that they're aware of where the turret location is going to be so that we can sync up a push together. Trying to think of what else I can talk about with Symetra. That's, I will say that, I mean, she does have 70 ammo in her magazine, and the rate of fire for her, I'm sorry, the rate of usage of ammo for her orbs is 7 ammo per second, or I'm sorry, for the beam. And so you have in total 10 seconds of using the beam. I definitely want to take out this Mercy before I take out the Reinhardt there, because she was out of position. Try to take out as much damage as I can on the Farah, being she put herself out of position. And then here, I think I can actually wire up the fountain to give a little bit of a boost there. And I think I'm going to try for something really cheeky, was to... Oh, shoot. I nailed the end of the cart. So there's one thing, too, that I've noticed is that sending out turrets, they have a pretty large hitbox, and they'll get stuck to things pretty easily. So, for example, there I was kind of aiming for that general area, but you will find that you make that mistake a couple of times where your turrets get launched onto things. Oh, man. That was nasty. Just shoving a ton of damage through here. Trying to wait until the Zarya shield is down so that I can take her out. I'm a little bit low on health, so I got to be careful on how I actually approach this corner. And I'm going to try to stay behind the Reinhardt shield. So here, I think my team needs a little bit of extra help to get from spawn. Oh, and I nailed her off the bat. That was so nasty, man. Okay, and hopefully we can get this Mercy. So here I can just, you know, sit on this Reinhardt shield all day long. Like, I don't need to reload or anything. She's so effective against when enemies run a very shield-heavy composition. And being able to strategically outmaneuver your opponents is a huge asset to Symetra. Now, I didn't show that off as much in this video, but I will say that that is, kind of in summary, that is the biggest asset of Symetra, is the ability for her to move your team from one point to another at instant speed. So that is probably going to be the video, guys. If you want to look up some Symetra teleporter locations, I would highly advise kind of educating yourself from the school of YouTube on that one. There are some great videos out there, and that is kind of a whole separate video as to where you can put teleporters to make your team transitions most effective. But yeah, that will sum up the video for me today. If you guys did enjoy this video, please leave a rating on it. And if you enjoy this type of content, feel free to subscribe to my YouTube channel. I'm always trying to help players get better at Overwatch or whatever game I happen to be covering for that particular video. And that will pretty much wrap up the video. So thank you all for watching, and hopefully I will see all of you guys in the next video.